Well, 3 months ago, we brought you the story of Rosie Fulton, a mentally impaired Aboriginal woman being held in a West Australian jail without trial or conviction. The 24-year-old is a victim of fetal alcohol syndrome and was jailed after a magistrate declared her not fit to plead. Well, last week, after a public outcry following our story, Rosie Fulton next week will be moved to Alice Springs to be closer to her family. But Aboriginal leaders fear that hers is just the forerunner of a wave of cases involving children who are growing up with fetal alcohol syndrome. John Stewart reports.
Rosie Fulton has spent 21 months in this prison near the West Australian town of Kalgoorlie with no conviction. In 2012, she was arrested after crashing a stolen car. A psychiatric report found she suffered from fetal alcohol syndrome and was mentally impaired. The magistrate declared her unfit to stand trial and sent her to jail because there was no alternative accommodation. Next week, Rosie Fulton will be moved to Alice Springs to be closer to her family.
I'm delighted that she's finally going to be out of jail after 21 months there, and of course she's also ecstatic about the idea of coming back to Alice Springs and to be able to contact her siblings. So yes, it's a really good outcome.
Ian McKinlay is Rosie Fulton's legal guardian. He's run a long campaign to get her out of jail. More than 120,000 Australians backed a petition to have her released from prison into community care.
It'll be a community-based support model in which she'll just live in a suburban house and will be provided 24/7 support.
But while Rosie Fulton is finally getting the support she needs, other mentally impaired prisoners are still being held in jails. In Western Australia, mentally impaired Aboriginal man Marlon Noble spent more than 10 years in jail with no conviction. There are currently 9 cases in WA prisons and 10 in Northern Territory jails. Disability groups estimate there are 30 cases nationwide. Professor Patrick Kazar from La Trobe University is calling on the federal government to conduct a national audit of all state and territory prisons and fund community accommodation for impaired prisoners who are not fit to plead.
They're staying in prison for a lot longer than they would have if they'd actually been found guilty of the crime and sentenced. Now that's just an outrage, and it's unbelievable that this is going on in Australia, and it needs to be stopped, and we need a national solution as a matter of urgency.
The Northern Territory government has built a secure care building in Alice Springs to house mentally impaired prisoners outside jail. But so far only men have been allowed to stay in the centre. In Western Australia, 2 similar facilities will be built over the next 18 months. But there are concerns that a large number of Indigenous children with fetal alcohol syndrome will soon come into contact with police and the courts.
We're going to see a wave of kids come through suffering FASD and have this brain injury that doesn't actually, it affects them in a way that they can't communicate, they can't learn this way the rest of us learn in the vernacular. They're just wired differently to us. We've got to start training our professionals like the police, like the teachers, like people working in the health field, that these are kids that need to be dealt with differently. They can't see one scenario and another scenario and put them together and come to a conclusion like we do. I think unless we find out how to deal with that, we're going to see a wave of these kids ending up in the legal system, and if they get the same treatment as Rosie, as Marlon, who knows how long they're going to be in this limbo.
Rosie Fulton spent 21 months in jail because governments couldn't find a place for her to stay. Now at least she has a chance to live in the community near her family. John Stewart, Lateline.